Great, thank you. Um, this is, I think, the sixth time that I've been invited to speak at CIP since Karen Thomas first invited me in 2009. They usually invite me here for two reasons. One is I represent the downtown of this city on the Bloomington Common Council. CIP Bloomington is in the district I represent. Hello, constituents. Please vote. The next city election is 2 years from last Tuesday. The second reason they invite me here is I'm a fellow traveler. Apparently, I was on the spectrum long before it was cool. It was 20 years ago this year that I discovered what we now call the autism spectrum from a magazine article. If it weren't for that discovery and the diagnosis that followed, I might not still be serving in my role in the city council, where I've served since 2004. The social challenges of politics are hard for a neurotypical person. For someone on the spectrum, you can imagine how much of a minefield it must be. Only a continuing effort to develop a vocabulary for autism has kept me from blowing up or giving up on my efforts to serve and improve the city all these years. Representing CIP and its students has been one of the aspects of my career I've been most proud of. But I represent a lot of students. Representing the city's centermost district means that of the 14,000 or so people that I call constituents, the vast majority are students at IU. They hardly know that the city even exists, or that I exist, or that I vote on things each week, like the water they drink, the buses they ride, the fire protection they enjoy. Politics are so skewed in this city because it's a so-called college town that I had to develop another new vocabulary. I needed it to talk about the IU campus. It's a city, within my city. Public campuses like IU duplicate many of the functions that cities perform, but they are run by the state and so exempt from our jurisdiction. They make my job harder and more confusing. They limit the city in ways that we chafe at. And so in 2013, I went back to college to study college. I got a master's degree in geography and wrote a book about how campuses came to be and why. And I want to share with you at least one thing I learned along the way. The first places that we call universities cropped up almost 1,000 years ago in Europe. They were gatherings of scholars who banded together after the rediscovery of Aristotle, whose works had been lost to Europe for centuries. The word university is not related to the word universe. It's related to the word union, as in a guild of masters and of scholars. But the word college has a different origin. Medieval students had to fend for themselves, find a place to live, find food to eat, find a place to study, find a place to pray. They even had to find places to have class. The first university students just pooled their money together to pay their lecturers directly, and they rented lecture halls in cities wherever they could. Sometime in the 13th century, someone at Oxford said, hey, why don't we build a place where students can have all of those things under one roof? Room and board, a library, a chapel, even a classroom. These were usually endowed by some benefactor, but by the 14th century, they were calling this place a college. It's the first time the word entered the English language, specifically to describe this kind of place. The original meaning of the word university was a group of people who studied knowledge and granted degrees certifying achievement in knowledge. The original meaning of the word college was a physical plant for that group of people. America would erase this distinction. Institutions of higher education, starting with Harvard in the 1630s, built physical plants in the middle of nowhere and called themselves colleges, not universities. There was no city around them at all. Americans coined the word campus, and colleges and universities became their campuses. They rejected cities. They turned inwards on themselves. Towns would eventually crop up around even the most remote colleges by necessity, because campuses couldn't do everything that they needed to function. To this day, people like me deal with all the municipal dysfunction that has followed this diluted idea. There's a lot more to that story, but that's for another day. I bring all this up because I had a realization while talking last week with the program's newest director, Ashley Lehman. While the place we're at today calls itself the College Internship Program, CIP, maybe without knowing it, has reproduced the conditions of college in the medieval sense, and in the way that the colleges of Oxford and Cambridge operate to this day. Regardless of what university is granting the degrees, this program is actually a college in the original sense of the word. The students of CIP live here, eat here, study here, take classes here, and I'm sure some of them find themselves praying here an awful lot. CIP has truly embraced the idea that a college doesn't need a campus when it invests in the city instead, when it lets the city be its campus. CIP students know Bloomington well, appreciate it, and harness it for all it's worth. I would have managed better had I had a resource like CIP in my early adulthood. They've always done college the right way. I am thrilled to be back to help celebrate an institution that plays along with its hometown. A few years ago, I was invited here for a public discussion with CIP's founder, Dr. McManman. During that discussion, which you can watch on CIP's YouTube channel, I offered an analogy using the plant kingdom that I still like to use to explain to neurotypical people how to think about people on the spectrum in a way that is accepting and not othering. Cognitively speaking, most people are like trees. They start out small, frail, and fragile. They slowly begin to grow until they stand firm. Eventually, they branch out, they grow leaves, and they bear flowers and fruit. That's most people, neurotypical people. What about neurodiverse people? What about people on the autism spectrum? I say that they're not trees, they're vines. They start out fragile too, and eventually they can branch out, grow leaves, bear flowers and fruit. What they don't do is grow upwards unassisted. If they don't want to creep along the forest floor all their lives, they need to find something to grow on. They may grow on a rock or on a tree. They may grow up to choke that tree. They may grow on a wall or a building. Whatever the case, vines need help to reach the sun. We don't think of vines as any less beautiful than trees. They're just different. And like trees, they don't need to bear fruit or flowers to be beautiful. They are beautiful just as they are. But when they give us flowers and fruit, we celebrate. If they're lucky, vines will find a trellis that will allow them to bloom to the fullest of their ability. We would never blame a vine for not having a trellis, for not being able to grow up like a tree. We just know that you need to build a trellis for a vine to be the most it can be. Today, on this special day, I want to extend that analogy a little further. If you want to cultivate plants, you create a garden. If you want to cultivate trees, you create what they call an orchard. Most schools are orchards. CIP was founded under the assumption that there are certain plants that need a different kind of help to blossom and bloom. This school is not an orchard, it's a vineyard. Like any good vineyard, the people who work here specialize in building trellises. Today, you're going to witness some of the fruits of these vines we call CIP students. Demonstrations of academic achievement, of productiveness in the workplace, of personal achievement and personal bests, of service to the community that CIP is an integral part of. Parents and friends, today your offspring, your students, are bearing fruit and in full bloom, full flower. It's an honor to help present CIP's harvest. Please enjoy the rest of the convocation.